What a lot of people don't realize about manufacturing is that the devil is in the details with manufacturing. So many people think that you're going to call up a factory, you're going to have one or two chats, and then it's going to happen. Suddenly you've got 5,000 units pumped out the factory. It just doesn't work like that.
Picture this. The spotlight's on you, the mic's in hand, and the words to your favorite song light up the screen. In business, just like in karaoke, it's not just about hitting the right notes. It's about the passion, the performance, and the personal touch you bring to the stage. Welcome to the Business Karaoke podcast. Here, we exchange stories with today's global leaders to modernize the dialogue around doing business in and with Japan. And I'm your host, Brittany Arthur. This episode is sponsored by Design Thinking Japan. Design Thinking Japan provides customized innovation programs and workshops to solve the big challenges and drive your business objectives with clarity, purpose, and speed. Welcome to this episode of the Business Karaoke podcast, where we are exploring the intricate dynamics of manufacturing in Japan as a foreign-led startup. Today, I'm incredibly proud to introduce Beau Becker. Beau's a unique mix of entrepreneur, executive, and engineer who's really making waves in Japan's business landscape. Beau also was our guest last episode, so if you'd like to go and check out that episode, please do. It's all in Japanese, so if you're Japanese, you can listen to it in your mother tongue, and if you're foreign, you can maybe be inspired by the two of us managing a conversation in Japanese, and also maybe use it for practice. Beau's the founder of Reiwa Pharmaceuticals and brings a wealth of experience in international business development, strategic partnerships, and manufacturing operations, with notable experience in China and also in Japan. His journey from the United States to Japan to also growing up in Belgium, and his dedication to cultural integration and linguistic proficiency offers invaluable insights into building strong manufacturing relationships in Japan. Join us as we dive into Beau's experiences, challenges, and all the lessons that he's learned along the way. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Go and check out all about Beau and Reiwa Pharmaceuticals down in the show notes. They would be ecstatic to hear from you. Now we're switching over to our English episode, and people might think that we're here to speak about our love for the business manager visa or banks.
A great topic. We could talk about that all day.
But we have decided to speak about something else. And I'm really excited to dive into this topic. We're going to be speaking about manufacturing. Beau's going to be sharing with us his views and his thoughts on manufacturing, particularly from in this English episode, more or maybe from a non-Japanese perspective.
Sure.
So if you listened to our previous episode, which we just recorded, that was we dive kind of a little bit more into the specifics.
How to choose a partner, how to find a reliable manufacturing partner.
Exactly.
We talked about
How to find someone really reliable, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? So I want to begin this now English side of things.
Sure.
With kind of hard questions, because as like the Business Karaoke
Sure.
podcast listeners know, that I'm doing my best to like get to the hard questions at the beginning. So
let's do it.
I was doing some reading up on manufacturing in preparation for our interview.
Awesome.
And I read that one of the kind of one point or kind of a school of thought is that manufacturing is underrated while design is overrated.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. Yeah.
So I would love to hear kind of like, we're going to set the scene a little bit about.
Yeah, the devil's in the details with this stuff, right? Yeah.
So this is where I sit back.
Right. Yeah. Well, actually, the first thing I want to do is just quickly list my my background so that everyone's familiar. Because I had always been interested in engineering and manufacturing. And I studied mechanical engineering in university with a specialty in factories and manufacturing. Kind of decided to go the businessman route, but really did the bulk of my career working for a Japanese manufacturing company in Osaka, where I got exposed to hundreds. I mean, I've visited hundreds of factories around the world, really in every continent, for almost every continent. Japanese factories, non-Japanese factories of various industries. And with a lot of experience in China itself, which I think is really great to see, very basic factories all the way up to the giant car factories, which fully automated, and all the way down to an aunt and uncle making metal parts in their backyard. And then I've been running my startup here in Tokyo, which is we do manufacture medicines and supplements. So I've had quite a lot of cool experience with it. But yeah, let's dive into it. That's an awesome question, and I think what a lot of people don't realize about manufacturing is that the devil is in the details with manufacturing. So many people think that you're going to call up a factory, you're going to have one or two chats, and then it's going to happen. You're going to suddenly you've got 5,000 units pumped out the factory. It just doesn't work like that, right? From the beginning, you've got to one, make concessions on what you're going to make, because there's no way you're going to be able to make exactly what you've designed. You're always going to have to make some kind of concessions on the size, on the box size, on the label, or whatever it is, to fit the ability of the factory you're working with. So that's already a big detractor for the design. But then for the manufacturing, it's even how many pallets are you going to be able to make? How many boxes can fit on the pallet? Where are you going to send them? And there's just so many little details when it comes to manufacturing, and it's not a short process. It's always something that takes time, with multiple checkpoints during the process to make sure that everything's going on schedule. And even most manufacturing gets delayed. Really, I mean, that's just how it works. And even in very professional manufacturing, when we're talking about making custom products, I mean, almost every manufacturing I've dealt with has been delayed in some sense. It almost never goes on the quick schedule you're hoping for. And being realistic with that from the beginning, I think, is very important, right?
So manufacturing from an outsider perspective, and I work in the service industry, so we do service, so much easier, but I do a lot of work with manufacturers.
I'm not sure I would agree with that.
And I do a lot of
upfront costs, for sure.
We do a lot of work with manufacturers, and I'm also listening to your stories, and it just seems like the hardest thing in the world. Honestly, it just seems like the hardest thing in the world. And so I would love to know, like, why you bother doing this incredibly hard thing.
I will say I love factories. I love being in factories. I love meeting with factory managers, factory workers. I really like the gritty environment, the idea of running the production lines, seeing that happen, working on the machinery, designing this. I think it's cool. But yeah, I guess I've always been someone who liked to make something, and the idea of just running a service isn't that exciting to me. I want to make something, hold it in my hand, show it to people, see their reaction. That's always been much more exciting to me. And yeah, maybe there is something exciting about actually doing a manufacturing. You just, I guess, with the example of this product that we're just debuting, it's a new product debuting here, right? The initial idea was almost even like a year ago, right? It was just an idea in my mind with, okay, we want to have it as a display box. And then, okay, we start negotiating with the factory, we start designing the label, we hire an illustrator, we test the ingredients, we get some friends to try it, see if they like it, get feedback, try again. We do the testing. I mean, just so much process goes into it. And then finally, after 6 months, the day comes when you visit the factory and you see 10,000 bottles going down the production line, all making what you envisioned come true. And then you hold a box in your hands. Yes, like God, we made it, and this is really going to help people. And I really find something fulfilling about actually making something. And yeah, I will say that the people you work with in this are usually great people, right? They want to help you. They do want to make something good, and they're very proud of what their factory makes. And so I find it to be a very fulfilling industry and work to be in.
And it's true. So as someone who's on the receiving end, so when I hold your product in my hand, I think it is a really cool thing to be able to give someone. It's tangible, and it's very interesting, and it's maybe easy for people to understand. So as in what you do, we make this thing. I think there's something really nice about that. But the more that we kind of see the product, you can't help but think the story, right, behind the bottle. What does this mean? You said that a year ago this was just an idea.
Sure. I mean, we had our first product, but it was, what's this next one going to be? I mean, there's so many ideas in your mind, right? And yeah, I love your question about design and manufacturing, because it is such a balance between the two. And one question I often get with our products that surprises me, someone will pick it up and they'll just say, wow, how long did it take you to make the perfect product like this? And I think, perfect product? What are you talking about? I mean, this is just so far from what I initially thought or exactly what I wanted to make. And it's the whole manufacturing and design process. And when you're making something, those two get closer and closer together, right? Because every step you take forward with the design has to be grounded in reality with the manufacturing, right? Easy examples is that I always wanted to make this product as a aluminum bottle. That was a lot of the, let's say, similar like hangover cures in Japan are using aluminum bottles. I thought that's what we got to have. And then to find out that, oh, actually the design doesn't work that well for that. They require the minimum order quantities are much higher for aluminum bottles. The price of an aluminum bottle is almost 4 times of a glass bottle. And so actually it's just not going to work, right? So even though the design was heading in that direction, it's like, okay, it's not going to work from the manufacturing side. So I feel like those teams, if you have a design team and a manufacturing team, those need to be the closest teams in your company, if not the same team. I don't know. That's probably not going to work, but they have to be so close together. And with my previous company in Osaka, we designed high precision machinery, and it was always custom designed machinery for customers' production lines, which was really cool. But basically, as the salesman, I was the conduit between the design team and the manufacturing team, which was really cool, actually. And I remember many times it would be like I would see the two getting further and further apart. And I would get on the phone, all right, guys, we need everyone in the room right now, designer, manufacturer. Come on, let's have it seriously. Let's talk about this. And the manufacturer like, oh, we just can't do that. So, there's no way, we've got to do this. And then you got to get everyone on the same page for that when it comes to manufacturing. And yeah, it's always about concessions when you're making your product. You're never going to be able to make, I mean, unless you make your own factory, invest millions, I mean, not even more than millions, hundreds of millions of even dollars to make a factory. It's just not going to happen. You've got to find a factory that is already making something similar to what you're envisioning, and then adjust your design and expectations to flow into what they're making is really how you can make something.
So what I observed with your story is that it's you have had an ability to be able to live in both worlds, right? Whether it's kind of like the business world and the manufacturing world, whether it's the Japan side and like the foreign side. And I think that this is a really an element that I think people feel really connected to you, because you can see that you have equal love for both sides, whether it's the manufacturing or the business, or whether it's the Japan or the foreign side. And I think that this ability to be able to translate the needs of both sides, I think has been really pivotal in you being able to be this kind of, not necessarily chameleon in a bad way, but this, like you're a puzzle piece that can kind of like fit into these different worlds.
Well, if you want to relate it to my story, I do think a lot of that comes from my upbringing, because most people know I am American, but I grew up overseas for almost my entire childhood in international school. And so from a young age, I was always around non-native speakers. I had friends from really every country in the world through my childhood, and was always never really grew up with one culture that was my own. I'm really the third culture kid. And so, yeah, even living in Japan, I almost don't even view it as like their culture or something. I kind of view it as like our culture, right? The world's culture that I'm just as much a part of as anyone else. And yeah, it's hard for me to put myself in any box that someone might. So I guess that has allowed me to be a chameleon in a sense.
And when it comes to the thing that I'm always really interested in when it comes to business owners in Japan is the ability to respect our culture, as you referenced, but you do have all of this experience that you can contribute. You do have a value that you can add. So talk a little bit about that element of course, you speak excellent Japanese, you have a respect for the culture, you know how things are kind of done here, but what are the things that you also like to inject into maybe, either the way of doing things or the business? What's kind of the spin that you like to add?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You can look at that from both sides as well. I've said it before. I think what every non-Japanese person is striving for is the 50-50 balance. Like 50% adoption of Japanese business culture, and then 50% or maintaining of your own personality and business culture. And I think that's what makes people feel comfortable, especially when you're working with a Japanese factory or something. They're not expecting, they know you're not Japanese, right? It's not, when you get on the phone with them, they know. But as long as they feel like you understand Japanese culture, you like Japanese culture, you're knowledgeable about how business works, and you're not trying to make a bunch of changes that they're not used to, right? Which they can get really nervous about. Which kind of leads me, maybe going with the flow is the answer to your question, because what I really do it a lot when I'm dealing with Japanese factories or Japanese partners in any sense. I really do go with the flow a lot, and I just, even if something bad happens, I don't freak out, right? For example, right, our factory made a small mistake on our first product where the text on the back of the label was slightly too small, and so we could potentially, be banned from selling it as an individual bottle, right? And so after the production, the manager called me and told me that, and right, I could have freaked out and said, okay, that's a big mistake. You need to compensate us. This is a disaster. But I just didn't do it. I just went with the flow. I said, I understand that this was a mistake, and we're good. We're partners, and we're going to make the next one better. Right. So just going with the flow in this sense. Or with this product, there was a point where we had to buy the peach juice last minute, and the factory ended up buying it for us. And they basically called me and said, oh, we can't proceed with this until you pay us upfront for it. And it was like, oh my God, production's like next week. Like, I'm out of the office. Like, how am I gonna do this? And I was like, can you not just put this till after the production? We're already gonna be paying you for the shipping then. And it was, but they wouldn't budge on it. It was like, okay, I'm gonna go with the flow. I'm gonna basically do whatever you guys want. And I do think, as the non-Japanese person working in this environment, you got to be ready to just go with the flow in a lot of situations, and try not to get emotional about anything. Go with the flow. Even when things may not be totally what you expected, better to go with the flow rather than make a big deal about it.
What's a good balance between going with the flow, which I'm a big fan of? So there's that balance of let's go with the flow, but at the same time, you can't just be bobbing along going, no. Do you, for example, have like key principles that you have? So for example, you're like, I'm happy to, I'm happy to be open about these points, but these points for me are absolutely non-negotiable. How do you manage that? Go with the flow.
I mean, that's obviously a very case by case basis,
right?
Oh
yeah.
But I would even say for me, it's maybe the number in my mind is 80% go with the flow. Like in many cases, right? And yeah, there's a lot of compromises you're gonna have to make when you're working with a manufacturing partner. And I would say most of the time, go with the flow. Do what they want to do, right? Another example, every year so far, we've manufactured this product, big production day. They invite us to visit the factory, and that's great, but actually it costs quite a bit to visit the factory. We've got to be at this station for them to pick us up at like 6 in the morning in the middle of nowhere. I've got to organize some partners, get everyone together, and it's quite a big deal. But because they've invited us to do that and they've asked us, just do it and go with the flow. Or after the production, or I'll get a call from my production partners saying, oh, next week we're in Tokyo and we'd really like to just visit your office. I'll have a packed schedule. Just make it happen, right? Do whatever you have to accommodate them for that, and go with the flow. And if they suggest going out for drinks, just go for it, right?
I have a funny go with the flow story. So as you know, in Japan, when it comes to meetings, they always tell you beforehand how many people are coming, and so either you can meet that number or whatever, right? I had 4 people, I had 3 people coming to this office, and as you can see, we have exactly 4 chairs, which was
3, so.
which is absolutely no problem. And then I got a call in the morning that a new person was also coming. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? One, I either stand, but if I stand, everyone's like going to stand. So I had to go from where our office is, there's a furniture shop 2 blocks down. I ran down and bought a chair. Rather than saying, oh no, sorry, ちょっと難しいとか, you just kind of have to go with it.
Yeah, what I did was sit on a case of drinks. Actually, it's happened before. I put a case of drinks and sit on it.
That just sounds like my entire 20s in Berlin.
Yeah. Case of beer. Yeah.
Case of beers. Those chairs, they're so stable.
Well, for us, it was anti-flush functional beverages that I propped up. And yeah, sure. But I really suggest that in culture-wise, 50-50, but there's going to be a lot of times when you just, and it really is part of Japanese culture that you don't say no to a lot of stuff. And even if Japanese businessmen do say no, they don't even say it directly. They're always saying it in a very, they just won't respond, or they'll find another way to say it so it's not negative. I would be as positive as possible. Always go with the flow when it comes to these things.
So we're at an interesting point in time at the moment where the made in Japan ideal, the motto, is almost coming back into mode, in the sense that the yen has never been, or is accessible to other currencies at the moment. So for example, we were just having a conversation about the minimum wage in Australia versus the minimum wage in Japan. Australia, it's hitting around $20. Here it's almost 1,000 yen, which is almost double. So Japan, what we know about Japan with the incredibly high quality is now becoming a little bit more accessible financially than it used to be in past years, which opens a new opportunity for people like yourself, which is a non-Japanese person, or actually you're a non-Japanese person, but you're a Japanese CEO.
I am, yeah.
We both are.
Very Japanese company.
Yes, yeah, we are both Japanese CEOs, which I always laugh because we can write. I'm a Japanese CEO because we are. I always think that's funny.
And I use a Japanese name, so.
For your company, or you mean you actually go? Which name do you use?
My Japanese name is Beau Becker, and I really, yeah, I would. We didn't really mention it just now, but I think it's another good point when dealing with Japanese factories and Japanese businessmen and stuff. Something about having a Japanese name just hits them the right way, because anyone who's taken it that far obviously loves the culture, has some kind of invested interest. So.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that idea of Japan being now maybe more accessible than it used to be in terms of a market from your perspective.
And I just think you're totally right. Like, manufacturing is like a long time foundation of the Japanese economy, right? I mean, we've known that all of the car brands, the pharmaceutical brands, the
construction,
construction. I mean, whatever it is, there's manufacturing has been such a key to growing Japan over the last 40 years. And I do find it a little weird that suddenly all of the rhetoric around startups is like, we need to have a digital unicorn. And it's like, hold on, what about this great manufacturing base and literally millions of trained manufacturing workers and thousands of companies? Why don't you focus on that? I think that would be a better idea. But yeah, I do think it's a really interesting time because the yen is cheap at this point. Factories in Japan are desperate for new customers, right? I meet so many factories who are willing to take a chance or willing to have a meeting with new brands just because they're desperate for new business. And so I do think if you're looking for affordable, top quality, very reliable manufacturing with a great brand, you can't do better than Japan. Right? I mean, it's really the top right now. And very interestingly, I mean, over the last year, even 6 months, just random Western companies contacting me to inquire about how to go about manufacturing something in Japan has been, skyrocketing. Really, almost every week, I would say at least one company is just trying to get more info about who they could talk to, what kind of factory could help them.
And what are some of the initial things that you suggest to them? So if they're saying, okay, they've got to come, the idea of coming to Japan.
Lower your expectations.
What are their expectations?
Just about the timeline. Most of the timeline, maybe the cost as well, right? When you're talking small batch, people don't realize how big of a batch you have to get to before manufacturing really makes sense.
How big is that?
Different for every product. Yep. But for example, our drinks, yep. Right? We're currently manufacturing in 10,000 bottle batches.
Okay.
Which actually it's quite a lot, right? 10,000 bottles. I mean, that's not a little bit. That's like 2,500 kilos or something. But that for the beverage industry, that's an extremely small batch, and our factory almost doesn't want to make it. Right? they're like, well, we won't even to make that small of a batch, we have to raise the price significantly, and it's not even until you get to about 10 times that amount that you're really talking about a high margin manufacturing base. And I think a lot of people who haven't manufactured before think that, we're just going to make one pallet, or we're going to make 1,000 boxes, and then everything's going to be fine. I would say lower your expectations. You have to start slow with a first small batch. That's going to be more expensive, but you've got to try it out first. And even the idea of going straight into 100,000 bottle manufacturing is crazy because you don't know exactly what's going to happen when you manufacture that big. There may be a small mistake. The mixture of the drink may come out a bit different in the big tanks rather than the small test samples. And so it doesn't even make sense. You have to do small batches first and build your way up. The process always takes longer than you expect because you've got to check stuff. The price is going to be probably slightly higher than you expect, maybe lower, depending on where you're coming from. But yeah, that's the first thing I always say is set the realistic expectations. Like it takes a while for all of this, and Japanese factories are notoriously conservative, right? And they one thing I'll say is they don't really like dealing with non-Japanese companies, right? It's not about the person, it's about the company, right? If they cannot sign a contract with a Japanese entity, they get nervous, right? And they say, even if you speak Japanese, if you're calling and you say, oh, this is a so-and-so candy manufacturer from Brazil, they're going to say, whoa, like we'd really like to deal with some agent in Japan or something that they can hold accountable.
Are you okay though? So for example, you being foreign, but being in Japan, do you pass?
I've never had a problem.
Okay.
Seriously, I will say I've been doing Reiwa Pharmaceuticals in Japan for almost 5 years now. I seriously cannot think of a serious discrimination that I've ever encountered other than the government, right? Right. So unfortunately, which is a whole other sad topic. But in terms of working with businesses, we've been rejected for sure, especially when it comes to retailers and distributors and stuff. But I don't think that's ever been because of me personally. I think they just, it's a new product. They would reject any startup. But I'll say I've had no problems getting meetings especially with manufacturers, even the big ones. I've had manufacturers that decided not to work with us, but I've met the buchos, I've met the directors and sat down with them. And I cannot really name any situation where being a non-Japanese person has really negatively affected my business, especially in manufacturing. So.
One thing when it comes to being non-Japanese, and you and I are like quite non-Japanese in the sense like tall, fair,
sure,
blue eyes for those who are just listening.
Well, get a Japanese name. See?
So
it's pretty good.
So one other thing is that I tend to like to use it as an olive branch, and I'll
put in the door.
Exactly, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So in our workshops, one of the things that we really need people to do is we need people to be kind of uncandid, right? So we just need them to be able to speak openly.
That's tough in Japan.
It is tough, we have like our ways.
Anonymity is the key.
Yeah, we have our ways of doing things, but one of almost a subliminal message that I can convey is that when I'm speaking in Japanese to the room, they know, okay, it's not about being perfect. Like it's almost like this subliminal kind of message. So what are some other things that you actually find to benefit you? So for example, because I know obviously, look, the Japanese language thing, it's a big thing, but just get a translator, right? It's a big thing.
Or speak or Japanese.
Exactly. Speak a little bit of Japanese, but I'm kind of more interested in maybe like what's a little bit deeper than that. What are some of the things that you use almost to your advantage?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that. I do think you can kind of create a relationship with the person because we're talking about manufacturing and factories, but at the end of the day, it's not a factory. It's actually a person that you're working with, right? Who's the one who's connecting with your company. Every factory that we work with, what comes to mind? It's the person who's in charge of you, who you meet every time we talk about this stuff. And when you meet those people, one thing I love to talk about is Christmas with my family, right? They just seem to love that. I'll show Christmas pictures of my family. I'll say, oh yeah, you know, Christmas is coming up. I have to go visit my family. We all give presents to each other. I tell these types of stories. Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. I'll also often say that I'm really connected with the non-Japanese business community here in Japan. Oh, that's really interesting.
Because you got
Yeah,
I don't have to do it.
yeah, that's really interesting. Like that's something special. Yeah, sure, sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, you can obviously use your own story. But I think if you convey the message that you're genuinely interested in Japanese culture, then they're more than willing to accept you in any way. But yeah, what is some more? I think it's a great question. What are some more really deep points that you got to bring in? Yeah, I do think. I mean, one classic one we always look at is the idea that a non-Japanese person has a new perspective on the market that someone might not have thought of before. And so for our products, at least, in fact, anti-flush products are a new category in Japan, but they're a product category that's already quite popular in the US that I knew about for many years. So I'll often bring that into the discussion. I'll say, yeah, this is, we're trying to develop these products for Japan, but it's already something that's normal in the US that many of my friends use. We all know about it, and we're trying to redesign it for Japan. That does seem to make people feel more interested in the project. I'm really trying to think of an even better answer for the question. It's a good question, and like, I mean, so a lot of times, you know, I find a new factory, something I don't even know about. I call them, you know, I'm speaking Japanese, but they know I'm not a native speaker, right? After a couple minutes or even sooner. But it's never a problem. They're always patient. But I do think there is something that might pique their interest about the bad Japanese, actually, right?
Yeah.
Because they totally as long as you're comprehensible, and then you know you've got a decent vocabulary, so you can talk about the key points of manufacturing at a factory. I do think there's something about getting your foot in the door with the bad Japanese. Like, hold on, what's going on here? There's suddenly this gentleman, Mr. Beau Becker, is calling me with this funny Japanese, asking about how to make a drink, and he's got this new idea. So I do think there's something to be said there about, you know, just using your non-native Japanese as a foot in the door in some ways. And yeah, I don't even study anymore. My Japanese is far from perfect. I don't want to get better, right? It's enough.
It's so funny that you say that, because I had a recent conversation with someone who, let's just say, probably is in a similar bracket to maybe your factory buchos kachos, that kind of personality.
Yeah.
And then I was, you know, telling him about that I'm increasing my Japanese language like
level.
level content.
Oh yeah.
And I said, but I mean, sometimes like it comes at, if sometimes I'm listening and I think I don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And then he said, no, if your Japanese is too perfect, he's like, I don't think I would like that.
Yeah.
And I said, what? You would prefer? Because I think I was using like AI tool to like improve my Japanese. And he said, you know what? I prefer how you wrote it versus this updated version, because it makes me feel like it's more you.
Sure.
And I thought, wow, that's interesting.
It is, and it's something interesting that anyone who's grown up with or around English language culture, it's interesting because there's so many accents and so much variety of English and English content that you grow up with no problem understanding, you know, British accent or Australian accent, whatever it is. But I think it's a lot more homogenous in Japan, right? You know, it's basically 1, 2, or 3 accents total, right? That make up the whole lexicon. And then suddenly here's a non-native speaker like doing their best. And as long as it's understandable, that it might actually be a foot in the door with that.
What are some things logistically, like tactical things that if someone says, you know what, I just listened to Beau on the Business Karaoke podcast, he's kind of like giving me a little bit of a kick in terms of maybe there's something that I could do. What are some like, if we get to like the logistics, the tactical stuff in terms of maybe it's, you know, in the manufacturing process or the Japanese customers, what are some things that you're like, this is what I focus on?
Yeah, well, don't be afraid to manufacture something, right? I mean, obviously there's upfront costs, there's a lot of design upfront, but don't let anyone tell you you can't manufacture something. You can make it. Look, 5 years ago, I didn't know anything about making a functional beverage, and here we are with our second product, which is I'm pretty proud of it. I'm really happy with what we've come up with. So you can do it, but what I would the process, how to manufacture something, right? Uh, First thing to do is actually unrelated to manufacturing is get the trademarks, right? Always keep that in mind, because before you start meeting with any potential factories, you want to have your brand trademarks taken care of. And that's a whole process. I think that's not really the topic today, but really anyone in the manufacturing industry will always tell you the first step is to have your brand kind of decided and get your trademarks. Because if you start meeting with factories and showing them all your brand info and stuff, you may very well start seeing that brand pop up without you being involved. So get your trademarks. But once you get past that step, the first thing to do is sketch out your ideal product. Just make an image of it, even if it's in your mind, but we'll put it on paper, right? Really get an ideal image and make a mock-up, make a prototype. If it's this bottle, I bought bottles in just maybe 10 of them on Amazon, right? Just little bottles. They were probably made in China. And I started mixing the drink in there. So I had something to show the factories, right? So you make a prototype of what your as close to your ideal product as possible is. Then you start researching factories that make something close to that is the next step. So you go to the way to do that is going to industry trade shows of whatever industry it is that will have that product. Going through industry associations online. Japan loves associations. Every industry has 5 or 6 associations you can find. So just search online for those associations, and then even search online for factories and start calling them. And I would say try to get a list of even like 10 factories, right? 10 factories that make something similar, and schedule a meeting with all of them. Even if it's an online meeting, face-to-face is better. And what you're trying to do in those initial meetings, there's not going to be any contracts, there's not going to be any serious talk. You're just trying to extract as much know-how from them as possible, right? So, for example, my company is currently developing a tablet version of the anti-flush product. I got a bunch of factories that make something similar and just sat down with their factory managers and said, okay, have you used this ingredient before? How much extra materials do you have to put in there to keep the tablet solid? What kind of flavoring do you put on there? What kind of coating? What kind of boxes you use, right? Just all these questions. And I'm sure you're going to learn a lot, right? No matter what you imagine the final product was going to look like, you're going to learn that, and each factory is going to say something different, and you're going to get this knowledge. And some factories are basically going to say, oh, there's just no way we could make this, or oh, we thought you were going to order a lot more, so yeah, we can't do such a small order. And your 10 factories is going to go down to 5 or 6, right? And then once you got all that know-how, go back to that sketch you made of the original product that was your ideal one, and adjust the design, remake it to see, okay, now that I've heard what the factories can actually make, let's adjust this again and get it a little closer. And then keep repeating that process, keep going, meeting with those factories, and you're not leading them on, you're just continuing the process. And you may have 3 meetings with the factory and then decide not to go with them. It's okay, it's normal. And keep pushing them to give you a paper quote, right? That's about as far as you can push them. And say, and most Japanese factories will not just give you a quote right away. It'll take 2 or 3 meetings before they give you a quote. And basically, because they're worried that if they give you a quote, then they'll actually have to make it, right? Yeah, no, honestly, that's what they're worried about. They think, they say, oh, we'll have to source all these materials, blah, blah. And get the quotes from at least 3 factories, right? So then you'll have an idea of how much the price is. And actually, something that I've realized in Japanese manufacturing is the price of the quote reflects how willing a factory is to work with you, right? And it's not that complicated, but until you actually see it, it doesn't necessarily make sense. Because if a factory makes you a very high quote, actually what they're saying is, we don't want to make this, right? Because within that price is basically a lot of money for them, because they don't want to do it.
They're mendokusai.
So, yeah, sure, mendokusai tax. And actually, you will probably get better service from the cheaper factory because they want to do it. And they're giving you a cheap price because they want to do it. And so I would usually suggest going with, maybe, I don't know, the cheapest, but among the cheaper factories, they'll definitely give you a better price. But yeah, it is almost an iteration in that process where meet with the factories that can actually do it, readjust that ideal image. Okay, take that back to the factories. Here's what we're thinking. Make me a quote, and they'll say, oh, we're not quite ready. We have to talk about these details. Oh, what about this ingredient? Okay. And then you meet again, and your ideal product is gonna slowly but surely morph into this whatever they're actually able to make. And then you're probably gonna have to change it based on their pricing and what's possible.
That's a great first initial step.
A little long-winded, but
no,
that really is how you make something.
Yeah. This is exactly what the Business Karaoke podcast is about.
Yeah.
One other thing that I find particular to Japan is that when you are the customer, actually, Beau, you are the customer.
Yeah, exactly.
And I find, yes, you and I are already laughing, right? You know where this is going. I find, despite me being the customer, whether it's, for example, we're applying to banks, or whether it's, in your case, you're looking for factories, I find we are constantly selling. As in, wait a second, you should be selling to me. Why are you getting me to sell to you? So talk to me a little bit about why you think that strange dichotomy exists and what we can do about it.
Well, I'm pretty sure I know why it exists. And this is coming from someone who worked in a very traditional Japanese company, or actually 2 for a total of 5 years. And I'm telling you, it's all based in this diffusion of responsibility in Japanese corporations, right? And speaking larger for the entire Japanese society, where there is such a fear among Japanese people to stand out in any way, right? And there's so many ways you could imagine that. But even at the very simple level, sitting in the company, you've got all your coworkers around you, you're the responsible for the new business, right? And you've actually got to bring up this new company to your boss, right? Okay, here's Mr. Becker, who's trying to make an anti-flush drink. Oh, we've never heard of that before. And he wants to use new ingredients that we don't know about. And, it's a new company. So what if they only do 1 order, and then we did all that work and then they disappear? I don't even want to bring that to my boss, because then he's just going to say, oh, that's a terrible idea. And, oh, I'm just so scared of standing out like that. And that's definitely what's happening, right? And so, yeah, the key to me of how to avoid that is going straight to the decision, because I do think most of those bureaucratic problems of us having to sell is mostly because there's a go-between, right? Unfortunately, who you're selling to is not the decision maker, right? And if you can get the decision maker right in front of you, I mean, you are still selling in some sense, but you're avoiding that diffusion of responsibility. You're getting right to the person that can make the decision. And so that idea of standing out negatively in some ways almost avoided. So that's my suggestion.
I love that, and I would also love to then piggyback that onto what I believe with this new maybe opportunity, let's say for Japan and non-Japanese people coming to Japan, is to bypass completely the keiretsu companies, so like the huge companies, and to go honestly stay away from and go directly to the small to medium businesses who you may get in front of the decision maker, because if you're talking to the larger companies, I'm talking about the keiretsu, I'm talking about the Itochu and Marubeni, like the huge ones. I mean, you're never going to talk to anyone who can make a decision there. But when it comes to kind of like
you can.
Oh, you can. You can.
And the way you do it is you go to the exhibitions, where they have all of the staff there.
Yeah.
They've got specifically Itochu. We go to the exhibition. They've got 30 staff there.
Yeah.
You look for the old man in a suit.
He's the guy.
He's the guy. It's always the guy. It's an old man. He's always wearing a suit, usually standing near the back of the booth, kind of maybe smiling, maybe not, just kind of watching his employees do the work. You go right up to that guy, usually with your product, and you say, "Oh, wonderful to meet you. I was hoping to just talk to you quickly about Itochu. Could you tell me more about your guys' culture?
Yeah.
What kind of business are you guys specializing in?" And if he tries to push you off onto another staff, you just don't let it happen. Really, you just be not annoying, but just persistent. You say, "Oh, actually, I really wanted to talk to you because I think I wanted to understand more of your business and culture and make sure this is a good partner for me to work with." Kind of make it that way. And another word that my old mentor always just instilled in my mind was collaboration. Kyoryoku, right? And so he would, whenever he met with, I mean, it was almost hilarious, but whatever customer or partner he would ever meet with, he would never say sales, or he would never say we're selling. He'd always be like, "Yes, let's collaborate together on this project." I mean, really, it was just us making machinery for their factory and stuff, but he just wouldn't even allow us to say it. It was like this, we're collaborating with this company and making a partnership for the future. And I think that's a great way to interact with those decision makers, because it kind of strikes, oh yeah, this guy suddenly here's this
he's on my team,
Mr. Becker, and he's talking about collaborating and he wants to know about our culture. And I mean, it is hard to get to the decision makers, but that's how I've done it. Go to the biggest exhibitions, look for those guys, go right up to them. Don't take no for an answer. I've met buchos from every big distributor and a lot of the big retailers just by doing that. It's really the way.
That is the way. The other kind of side of the coin that I kind of wanted to give a little bit of detail to.
Sorry.
No, not at all. No, this is what it's about. It's about painting the 360 picture. That's definitely the way. That's definitely the way to get to the big companies. However, there's a very short feedback loop in the smaller companies. In terms of like getting in front of the decision maker. And I'd love to hear your view on the possibility or the attractiveness of a smaller manufacturer, because I mean, when you're kind of foreigner, you kind of think maybe I should go somewhere big because but I mean, maybe that's not the case. Maybe you can go. So talk to us about that.
Sure. So what's the ideal manufacturing partner for any small company trying to produce, right? It's maybe 4 points, right? It's someone who a factory who's in the countryside, right? So they've got cheap labor, they've got nice people, right, who live in the countryside and are very humble, kind people to work with. It's a factory with, let's say, 50 to 200 workers. Right? I mean, it can be a little outside that either way, but I think that's a good medium-sized company. Even up to 500 is not that bad, but I think 50 to 200 is ideal. So then they're not bogged down by the internal bureaucracy and everything. It's a company that specializes in OEM manufacturing, right? They're not doing a lot of their own products. They're really just servicing other companies' manufacturing, specializing in that, accumulating know-how in certain product types, and just really able to give you some kind of know-how. And usually a company that doesn't make their own brands, right? So that you don't have to worry about them trying to take your product down the line. It's a company that's really doing the manufacturing only. You're totally right that trying to focus on a big manufacturing partner is going to end in disaster. It really, and we've tried it. I won't name any names, but so we were making this functional beverage, right? This was the first product. We had, I talked about 20 factories, and one of them was a big manufacturing partner, basically part of a Keiritsu that was making small drinks, large drinks for a lot of companies. And we met with them. They actually wanted to do a contract up front, like we'll talk about this. And it was like, we were just talking about the initial formulas and bottles, what could we use, blah, blah, blah. And they wanted to do a contract up front, and it just got crazy. And it was like, okay, suddenly the lawyers are involved, and it's like, what? For this, and it took like 2 months.
And a Keiritsu lawyer is a different,
breed. We weren't even doing anything, and they demanded that they have no liability for an NDA, and it's like, what are we talking about? And then finally, after 2 months, when I just basically went with the flow and did what they wanted, so fine, let's just give me a quote and let's see it. They wouldn't even do it finally, right? So you're just asking for troubles. Those big manufacturers, they're so used to big contracts, partners they've been working with for 50 plus years. They don't want to change anything. They've got no incentive to bring in a small company. You don't want it. Don't even consider it. Go for the factory that wants to work with you and that you can trust, and I would really suggest, don't think about the first batch you're making. Think about 2 years down the line. Think about how you're going to grow together and actually get a partner. I mean, really, my company, if we didn't have the partner that we have now, I mean, it would be a disaster, right? We wouldn't have anything, right? There'd be no products out there, and they've helped us so much. And so, yeah, I really think about what the future of that partnership, and that it's going to keep growing.
Okay, some great advice. And to wrap up, my last question is, what are you most excited about for manufacturing in, let's say, like the short to midterm? What are you looking at that you're saying, this is a really cool opportunity for us in manufacturing?
For my company specifically,
or in general, in terms of manufacturing, what has manufacturing, specifically here in Japan, what have they got to look forward to over the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, you could talk about automation in the factories, obviously, and that type of innovations within the factory. But yeah, specifically in Japan manufacturing, I mean, the Made in Japan brand is strong, right? The people love it, and for some reason, most people outside of Japan still imagine Japan to be this high technology, base of high technology, whether it is or not. And I do think when people think of Japanese manufacturing, they're usually thinking of something very expensive, something high quality but expensive, and maybe difficult to deal with. But actually, it's not expensive, and you do get super high quality. So I do think if there's something to look forward to, it's probably taking on lots of made in Japan manufacturing from non-Japanese sources, I would say.
Yeah, like taking it back in a way.
Yeah,
like it coming back.
Exactly, going full circle, coming back. Yeah, it is pretty cheap right now, manufacturing. As long as you deal with the types of factories that I just described, I do think you can get a great deal for top quality, and you will work with wonderful people. I guess the language barrier is obviously a key problem, and it's interesting. In a lot of these factories, they're dealing with that classic Japanese problem where it's a third, fourth generation owner, and their kids don't want to take over, and they're looking to be bought up, or they're really looking for a total change of industry in many cases, because the business, what they've been manufacturing for the last 50 years is no longer popular. And so it's a really interesting time where there's so much opportunity with not a lot of investment, because these factories, there's so many desperate Japanese factories. And I mean, I kind of mean that in a negative way, but also in a very high opportunity way, that there's so many small Japanese factories that are not doing great business, that are really eager to find that next step of partners they can work with. And that's how we've got our partners, is that they are kind of desperate in a way. They're really looking for a customer that can be their next big fish and someone they can grow with. And so it's if you're looking for someone to grow with and get a good partner and good deal, I do think Japanese manufacturing is great. For one-off manufacturing, I'm not sure, but I think for serious long-term partners that really outsource your manufacturing, it's really a good time to be doing it in Japan.
And Beau, if you weren't in manufacturing, what would you be doing?
What would I be doing? My passion for coming to Japan is actually sushi. I've always been crazy. Anyone who has a sushi dinner with me just says, "Oh wait, I can't believe you're so passionate about this. Like, how do you know all this stuff about the fish?" Right? And it's like I love, it sounds silly, but I am a huge sushi nut. I've just always had this dream to start some kind of sushi related business. I'm really trying to suppress that now.
Has to be on the burner.
5 years into anti-flush products in Japan, and I'm really proud of what we've done. The company is growing and growing. I'm 100% focused on that. But
what's your order? What's your sushi order? What's your number one?
Man, watch out for your wallet.
Because what's your order?
Well, we can talk about sushi all day, because I'm very passionate about Japanese counter sushi. And what I'm talking about is where there's like a traditional master, and he kind of becomes your friend in a sense, right? And the way it works is all Japanese business people will basically choose maybe one or two masters that they go to consistently, and he'll know your order, and he'll talk to you. Whenever you bring somebody with you, he'll be kind of promoting you in a way and making you look good. And I really love this culture. And I particularly love a type of sushi called Edo Mai sushi, where they basically try to recreate the traditional style of sushi from the Edo period, about 200 to 250 years ago, where they don't use any sugar or vinegar in the rice. They use only red sour vinegar. It's really cool. And so I like to go there. And if we're talking about the fish, I will say the fatty tuna. I will say the kani miso, which is like shrimp. Oh no, sorry, crab innards, I guess you could say. Then I love the uni, the sea urchin, big one. Let me think. I love.
I think those are three good orders.
Aji, mackerel. Yeah, we could go.
Yeah.
The eels. I love a lot.
Beau, thank you so much, and I hope that this conversation, people feel more courageous and more positive about coming to Japan. I have to say that in our interactions, I have felt more aware of the challenges. However, I have felt equally more confident, more capable that I maybe can do it myself. And I hope that
you can do it.
So I hope that
if I can do it, anyone can do it.
So that's honestly, that was my wish with this episode, that Beau can give you, the listener, the same confidence that he has given me, which is, hey, you can do it. I mean, just be aware of what you're getting yourself into and you can do it.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is just if you're serious, if you've got a great idea and you want to manufacture something in Japan, you're always welcome to reach out to me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And the other thing I'll say is my company makes products for people who turn red after drinking alcohol. If you know any friends with that problem or you have it yourself, we'd love if you introduced our products to them. We really are trying to help those people.
And we will have all of the company information in the show notes and about how you can get in contact with Beau. So Beau, thank you so much for the exuberant amount of time that you've taken to come and join us in the Business Karaoke podcast. And you are welcome back. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。